Greetings, programs, and welcome to the Awesome Friday podcast for the week of February the 20th. We're recording on the 19th, and it's the 20th. It doesn't matter. I don't know why I did this whole date thing. My name is Matthew, and with me, as always, is Simon. And we're both pretty out of it. Me because I'm on holiday, and him because he has COVID. So, how are you, Simon?
Well, I joined Club COVID this week. Unlike Club Tropicana, drinks are not free. I was saying to you earlier, if this is the double vaxxed and boosted and less bad version of COVID, then holy shit, what was Delta and the original strains like? Because it's been a very rough head cold, and my wife's got it as well. It came home via my daughter from school. I don't think anyone who's got kids going to school is going to avoid this because it's just gone right through my kids' class. Both the teachers are off as well. We were fine until we weren't, and then. And luckily, the kids, my daughter had it as like a day's worth of sniffing, and then it just went. And she gave it to me, and I think either she gave it to my wife or I gave it to my wife, and it's been a thing. Today I am in the exhausted from moving from one room to the next, but at least I'm not streaming. My nose isn't streaming, and I'm not coughing so much anymore, so that's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a week, and it's my birthday weekend. And
happy birthday. Happy 39th birthday.
Yes, we get stuck at 39th. Absolutely. I'm going to be like a vinyl with a little chip in it, so I get stuck on one part. I should be at Fan Expo. My wife bought me a family ticket to Fan Expo Vancouver today, and I should be there, but I'm not because I have COVID. So that's a pain in the ass, but my birthday is, so you're listening to this, it's Sunday, my birthday is tomorrow, future tomorrow.
Family day. Ooh.
Family day this year, so my birthday is family day, and my wife was born on the 1st of July, which Canada very graciously makes a holiday every year, so we matched stat birthday holidays this year. But yeah, it's been a tiny bit of a buzzkill.
It's funny because your birthdays both land on holidays, and the only noteworthy thing about my birthday is it's the day after the summer equinox, which means that every year on my birthday I talk to my father, and my father says, "Oh, the days sure are getting shorter, aren't they?"
Wow, it's very poetic of your dad to mark the passing of time so beautifully.
Yeah. He's very attuned to the length of each day, I guess.
Well, he's a country man. He wakes up by dawn and goes to bed by dusk and hunts naked in the woods with a knife between his teeth. So this is the way on Salt Spring, I'm sure.
I mean, no, he doesn't go to bed at dusk. That's ridiculous.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I forget about the howling. Which brings us very nicely to today's episode.
That's true. Before we get started, you've been off with COVID for at least a couple of days. Have you been watching stuff? Like, other than the things we're about to talk about, what have you been doing with your time?
The weird thing is, I've watched one of things we're going to watch today, and enough of the other that I can talk about it. But the weird thing is that when you're off and all you can do is rest, it takes a lot of effort to kind of watch something on TV. So we've been watching. Last night we watched Night at the Museum, and I'll tell you what,
Night at the
Museum is a great movie. There's some great camera work in that movie. Sean Levy, who recently directed Free Guy, directs the shit out of this movie, and there's some fantastic.
Sean Levy's a great director. He also did Real Steel, and he's doing the upcoming Netflix release, The Adam Project, with Van City local Ryan Reynolds. It's a bylaw. We have to refer to him that way. But yeah, he hasn't really made any bad films. They're all super fun.
Well, I didn't realize he also did a lot of Stranger Things, which I've never seen. But there's some great long camera sweeps through the museum. Like, you get a really great sense of geography and space. It's really, really good. And then on my insistence, we started last night and just finished this afternoon High School Musical 3, and which is the movie that is responsible for the modern movie musical. You're welcome, modern movie musicals. They wouldn't exist without High School Musical 3. This is the only High School Musical to get a theatrical release, and it really shows. And it's bumping the budget. It's professionalism, the amazing choreography, the amazing songs. I legitimately 5-star love that movie. It's fantastic.
Nice. I have never seen it. But while
Wow.
I'm dubious of your claim of it specifically being
Oh, I can go
responsible for
on.
the resurgence, I will say that I think that High School Musical as a whole definitely has a lot to do with the resurgence and interest in the musical. So I do appreciate it for
One day, I'm
that.
finally gonna have my say, and instead of doing like a Thing episode or Spider-Man's episode, which is probably coming up at some point, we're gonna do a High School Musical episode where you watch all three, and then we talk about it on the podcast. And I talk about how it reinvigorated modern movie musicals.
I mean, I'm into that. They're all on D plus as far as I know. So
Yes, they are.
we should make a
Bear,
plan for a
bear,
slow week in the spring.
bear in mind that High School Musical 1 is a TV movie, and boy, it's made with a TV movie budget. And I don't think they expected it to be the genre-defining masterpiece that it turned out to be. High School Musical 2 is not very good. It's not very good at all. It's set in a summer holiday between school years, and I think they realized that the whole point of High School Musical is that it should be a musical in a high school, not about kids playing in a swimming pool. But High School Musical 3 absolutely nails it. But anyway, this isn't the High School Musical special. How are you feeling? What have you been doing with your week off? I've been very jealous.
Very little. It's been great. In addition to, I took a week off my day job and I used the time to finish up a bunch of schoolwork because I'm still taking classes at places. And I've been watching. If you've been following me on Twitter or if you follow me on Letterboxd, you know that I've been rewatching the Spider-Man films this week. I hadn't watched Spider-Man 1 since before I started studiously logging everything I watch on Letterboxd on January 1st, 2016, which seems like a long time ago now. But so I hadn't rewatched Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, since before that. I had watched Spider-Man 2 and 3, I believe. I'd have to go look again, but I think it was in 2017. And so I watched all three of those, and I've watched both Andrew Garfield Spider-Mans, and in preparation for, I'm actually going to go to the movies tomorrow. What will be today for those of you listening on Sunday? I'm actually going to finally go see Spider-Man: No Way Home. So, yeah, and I mean, my hot take about the Spider-Man movies is that Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3 is pretty good, and that I've actually had an interesting a reversal. I used to think that the Amazing Spider-Man 2 was a worse film, but I think actually the Amazing Spider-Man 1 is actually worse than the Amazing Spider-Man 2 for a couple of technical reasons. But they're both not good. So, and I honestly, there's a whole resurgence of like, if you're on like movie TikTok at all, but there's a whole group of young people who want like a third Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movie, and I sort of get it because he's actually him and Emma Stone are really good in those movies, but they're not good movies. I don't know why you would give Mark Webb another chance. Like they're not good. It's I don't understand. So, anyway, so yeah, I'm actually going to the movies tomorrow. I'm both excited and terrified. So because there's a raging pandemic on, as evidenced by 50% of this podcast has the disease. So
Well, I guess
yeah,
if you sit there and you're N95 and don't eat popcorn or anything, then it's you're in a better
that's probably
position, I
fine.
think. Yeah.
And I'm double vaxxed and boosted. And at least the time that I purchased my ticket, which was yesterday evening, I was only the third seat sold. So
Right.
hopefully it stays relatively empty.
Yeah. That's exciting though. So we should definitely do a Spider-Man podcast special at some point when I finally see this movie too, because I love. I always get the Tom Holland ones mixed up. The second one is Away
Far from
from
home.
Home, Far From Home,
Far from
and
home.
the
Yeah,
first one's Homecoming, right?
that is correct. Yes.
So Homecoming's fine, but Far From Home is probably one of my favorite Spider-Man movies, like period. So I would love to
I
do a
mean,
Spider-Man special.
as much as I think, and I can just give you a spoiler right now, if we do a Spider-Man special where we talk about which one we think is the best, I think that Spider-Man 2 is still a masterpiece and a top three superhero film of all time. But the best Spider-Man film and the best superhero film of all time is Into the Spider-Verse. And I will not be taking questions at this
Yeah.
time.
Well, we don't need to do the podcast then. Excellent. That's the end. It's
Yeah.
Spider-Verse. Moving on.
Yeah. Good. So, moving right along, this week we're covering two horror films, one from Netflix, and I think it's the ninth sequel in an ongoing franchise of slashers, and one a atmospheric period set drama that happens to have werewolves in it, which is on demand from Elevation Pictures here in Canada. We're talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Cursed. And we're going to start with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Simon, why don't you tell us how far into Texas Chainsaw you were able to make it?
Well, I mean, I can tell you it's 18 minutes and 60 and some kind of seconds. 18 minutes, basically,
Yeah.
into this movie. And after watching 18 minutes, I feel confident that I can talk about the entire movie. I
I
feel
watched
like
the
I've
whole.
seen every side of that movie.
I watched the whole movie, and I can tell you that it's only 84 minutes long, which is probably one of the single biggest points in its favor, to be totally honest.
Yeah.
Um, but unlike you, and actually unlike most people, I thought it was fine. The general critical consensus on this film so far is that it's bad, 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 and I think it's fine. I thought I had a pretty good time with it, even flaws and all.
So I'm
Um,
really enjoying the discourse over this because when I decided to stop, and we'll talk about why later, I Wikipedia'd the plot so I could talk about it and see if I wanted to carry on watching. Turns out I didn't, and then I started reading a lot of discourse about it, and it's so interesting, this film, because everyone agrees that this is not a good film. It is not a good
oh
film,
yeah,
but everyone
I,
either says this is not a good film and is a total waste of time, or this is not a good film and I enjoyed the hell out of it.
yeah, and
And no, nobody's
I'm in
wrong,
the
right?
yeah, I'm in the latter camp for sure. It's definitely not a great film. I mean, for starters, it's not scary. And last I checked, horror movies are supposed to be at least a little bit scary in the same way. Like there's one shocking moment, and it's right at the end. Like one jump scary moment right at the end that did get me. But the rest of it's not scary. Leatherface has been reduced to just another hulking brute killer, and not anything, unique really. Um, but a lot of the kills are super inventive, and I liked the two main lead girls in it. Um,
What's the
I
synopsis of this movie? Let's start with that because I mean I feel like you could do that a better job because
because I actually
there is
watched
some
it.
you actually I mean I can tell you what happened in this movie, but I get the impression that it's kind of tied to the other ones, and I haven't seen any of the other ones. So why don't you go
so
for
so interestingly, I have actually only seen two of the like nine films.
it?
I've only seen two of the other ones. I've seen the original, which I haven't seen in years, and I've seen, and I can't remember what number it is, but there's one that's like the next generation and has a very young Matthew McConaughey and Reese Witherspoon in it. I think it's Reese Witherspoon. Um, and I haven't seen that one since I was like a teenager. I don't think so. I have very little connection to this as a franchise. Um, but the basic synopsis is that a group of young people, of course, led by two influencer chefs, have purchased effectively the entire small town of Harlow, Texas, and they drive down there in their Tesla to basically, make sure the town is in okay shape. And then a bus full of their investors shows up. And the whole thing is that they're going to gentrify this town and make it like a destination for hipsters. Um, and there's, a couple of locals. There's a guy at a gas station who I can't remember what he calls them, but he calls them gentrifuckers or something like that at the very beginning. And there's a mechanic who's very much, open carries a gun and is like, y'all don't understand people who work for a living, to these hipsters. But the inciting incident of the plot is that they're surveying all the buildings in the town, and they come upon one that has an old lady in it, an old lady in it, and the old lady's played by Alice Creech, who's always great.
Yeah, she's
Um,
fantastic.
and she insists that she still owns her house, and after like basically giving her a panic attack with their harassment, she's led off with her oversized son, who's only ever kept in shadow, in the town ambulance, along with one of the young people. And on the way to the hospital, I guess, we find out she dies and her oversized son uh, goes on a murderous rampage because it turns out he's Leatherface. And the two influencer girls figure out that they were wrong, that like the woman actually had been able to retain her house, like they did like kick her out of her own house. So they are the young people are actually kind of the bad guys in this one. um, and basically the rest of the movie is a chainsaw massacre. There's not there's one other B plot that doesn't really fit, that's desperately trying to capitalize on the same sort of story that the 2018 Halloween film did, where the final girl from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre shows up with a gun and a cowboy hat, intent on killing Leatherface. And it, on paper, looks totally badass, and it doesn't fit with the rest of the movie, and I kind of wish they hadn't done it. Uh, but did I mention that the kills are pretty inventive? Like that's all I'm here for. That's what I was here for.
See,
It's a
this
bad
is a
movie. It's a bad movie I enjoyed. Let's just be again 100% above board. This is not a good movie, but I enjoyed it.
so let me explain why I stopped watching then. Because
Yeah.
on the terms of the kill, so I in the first 18 minutes you meet these utterly contemptible young people, and I think when you've got a group of people that are about to be picked off by on a murderous rampage, which is this genre, you've got to like some of them. You've got
There's
to
only
like,
one there's only one who's actually likable.
yeah, well, and that's been generous, I think.
And I'll give
You've
you
got
I don't want to spoil anything, but in a genre that is sort of defined by having a quote final girl, I'll give you a hint which one survives.
I wonder. But the so in the first 30 minutes you meet these people and they are so up their own asses. And when the Texas guy rolls up with a gun, it's meant to be like you're meant. I think you're meant to hate the Texas locals, but the guy with a gun is like pretty low key. These asshole kids start mouthing off at him and being really rude about this
Yeah.
guy who is like literally right next to them for no reason, and they're being so like stuck up. And so
So
when
you
they
do
get to the when they get
I
to the
will
town,
I'm going to
sorry, go
interrupt you
ahead.
just for 1 second to say that
Right,
there is a reason why they react to the gun that the way that they do, and I don't know if at 18 minutes if you got to that part yet.
I I know what you're referring to because I read it in Wikipedia, and
Yeah.
and but that could have been done. It wasn't
Well,
just a
I'm
reaction to
yeah,
it
I'm not saying
wasn't
it was handled well. I'm just saying that
yeah
like there is at least a plot related reason for them to be upset about the presence of a firearm.
yeah.
Although, to be fair, if you're upset at the presence of firearms, maybe Texas isn't the place to be.
Where should we buy a town? I wonder. And this town, I gather, is the site of the original murders, right?
Yeah,
So,
it is.
so, and it's famous for that. They sell. I did the only thing I liked that was when it started. I really like meta horror, so I really like the chainsaw bottle opener and like
Hmm.
the really tacky, all that horrible time being reduced to tacky tourist shit. I was like,
Hmm.
oh, okay, I like that. I wonder if the rest of the movie is going to feed into that. Guess what? It doesn't.
No.
Um, so anyway, the town is this, I mean, cowboy esque like tumbleweed dust town, and then they find Alice Creech, as you mentioned, who I love. The first time I saw her was in First Contact, and I watch her as much as I can. I think she's a fantastic actress, and she deserved much better than this movie.
Mm.
The But the way they deal with that, they're so obnoxious, even though they kind of the black guy's got his uh, rightfully got his back up because he's got a fluttering tattered Confederate flag hanging outside, so he's a little bit antsy about that. But the girl just does nothing. The script that she has to deal with is so like ridiculously rude, and the way they deal with that. I know later when they find the thing they said that they didn't have, if you know what I'm referring to.
Yep.
Sure, that's payback on that, but it's just so, like you said it on the day we watched it. It's so ham-fisted. It's
Oh
so
yeah, the whole
ham-fisted.
thing.
There's no subtlety or nuance or intelligence in any of it. And then so I watch, and of course the boy comes down and says, "He's my last boy. He's always lit backwards, so you only ever see his shadow. He's a giant hulking mass, but he's probably fine."
Yeah.
And so when they go in the van, and I'm going to spoil the first death, which is the only one I saw with my eyes,
Mm-hmm.
when she dies, and one of the deputies in the back of the van tries to stop him rattling an oxygen container,
Well, so she
and
yeah, she dies, and then she has this oxygen container that when she goes into like a coughing fit or feels unwell, she basically like turns it up or opens the
uh,
valve a little bit more, and so he frustratedly starts fiddling with the thing, and the deputy grabs his hand, and then Leatherface grabs him by the wrist, breaks his wrist basically all the way off, revealing two like
mm,
wrist bones, shards of wrist bones, which he then stabs the whole hand and wrist directly into the guy's neck.
and there's
And
no yeah,
I was going to say, I
there's
think
no
this is the
like
moment where Simon like pieced out, and this is the moment
oh
where I
yeah.
was like, okay, I will watch this.
Yeah, because
Basically,
do you know what's really interesting? That's way too gory for me. Gore for gore's sake, without any kind of intelligence or, dare I say, like humor, is too much for me. Like a full frame, like arm snapped in the neck. If you compare this to like the opening 10 minutes of Freaky with Vince Vaughn and that actress I can never remember. You got a better memory than me. Who's the girl in
yeah,
Freaky?
I'm blanking her name on her name right now. To be
Anyway,
totally honest,
which is a fantastic movie. Freaky is a really great love letter to classic slasher movies. The opening first 10 minutes of Freaky is the most horrifically violent slasher I've seen. And I've seen quite a few.
Catherine
And
Newton is her name.
that Catherine Newton, and she's going to be Ant Man's daughter. No, have I got that right?
Yes, yeah,
Ant Man's daughter.
Cassie
She's
Lang.
Cassie. Yeah, she's Cassie Lang. Great actress. But the violence is done with style, and it's done with reason, and it doesn't show you everything. It doesn't give you a full freeze frame of everything going on. And I just felt like we got to that part. I'm like, yeah, I'm not watching this. And of course I was sick as well. I'm like, I don't have the capacity to watch a movie that's going to show me this kind of stuff. I just can't do that right now. And
Hmm.
up to that point, if I'd loved the people, I would have carried on watching and just skipped past the violence. But I was like, I don't care if these people die. I want. I don't care about any of this. It's awful. So that's
Yeah,
where I stopped. Does it get any
I mean, it's,
better?
and that's where I was like, okay, like that was inventive. I want to see what else they come up with, basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, not a good movie, but watching the way people die was inventive. I think the filmmakers think they have something clever to say about like hipsters and, or I should say like millennials or Gen Z or whatever we're calling them today, and like influencer culture and something, but it really doesn't. It's just saying that they don't like them, as evidenced by the scene where Leatherface shambles onto a party bus full of kids, or I guess like 20 somethings, dripping in blood from the person he's just killed in the front of the bus, and they're in the back of the bus behind a door, behind a curtain. So I don't know how they didn't hear what happened at the front of the bus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he walks into the room, and there's like music playing and lights strobing, and all of them grab their phones, and he's sitting there dripping with blood and with a running chainsaw. And one of them says, "One move and you're canceled, bro." And then they all get massacred like immediately. Like there's like an extended scene of like a shot from outside of like blood splashing on windows, and like they are, I mean, to their credit, there's a chainsaw massacre in this Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, so that's nice. And like some of it's really inventive, and the way that the two main girls sort of get away from the massacre is kind of fun. But like I say, I think it thinks it's trying to say something, and it's just not. It's just
Yeah.
the shallowest, basest version of that. Um, and yeah, that's basically my review of the whole movie. It's not good, but I thought it was fun. you know.
It just feels like there's a few key points of the genre that it completely misses, and it's very interesting that it came out so close to Scream. I haven't seen the new Scream. Have you seen the new Scream?
No, it's only in theaters, so I haven't seen it yet.
But all the other Screams, like you know what's going to come. Like the first Scream in particular, really it's a great film to teach you why that genre works so well. When
Hmm.
the uh, you've actually got style in the kills and creativity in the kills, but also you've got a bunch of people with different dynamics, and some of them you like and some of them you don't like, but you still don't actively want them all just to fall through a hole.
Well,
And
Scream
just
is
this,
also a good one to start with because the whole point of Scream is that they're using the tropes of horror for their,
mhm.
the bad guys using the tropes of a horror movie in order to carry off their plot, right? Like it's
Yeah,
a movie that is deconstructing the the type of movie that it is as it goes, which is actually really smart.
yeah. I really like as well the kind of sequels where they have to do something different. Like Jason, is it Jason X, where Jason goes to space? Like
Yeah, or
the
no,
more
yeah. He doesn't go to, so he goes to space, but what actually happens is that he's cryogenically frozen, and then like an archaeology ship comes to Earth like hundreds of years later and like brings him on board as like an artifact of the 20th century, and
see, I
he's
love that.
remade with nanotechnology, and honestly, that movie is so dumb, but again, very fun, very
But
fun.
exactly, I really like Freddy versus Jason as well. There's a moment with these big slasher icons where they kind of become a bit more um, for the audience. Like early Freddy Krueger compared to Freddy versus Jason Freddy Krueger is quite a different beast. Like Nightmare on Elm Street legitimately gave me nightmares for years because Freddy Krueger is not a fun person to be around. But
Hmm.
I really enjoyed Freddy vs. Jason. And actually, my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street out of all of them is Wes Craven's New Nightmare, where he sort of bleeds out into the real world. And you've got Robert Englund haunted by all he can do is paint like these dark, smeared images because he's got nightmares of Freddy Krueger coming through into the real world. And again,
I
it
don't
just
know if I've
really
ever seen that one.
it's really good, and it
Hmm.
plays with this whole idea of again, you've got a final girl from the original, um, but she has nightmares of Freddy, like the actress phoning the actor Robert Englund saying, "I'm having these weird nightmares about Freddy Krueger," and it all sort of intertwining. And there's some really good actually action direction in that as well. It's really good, really, really good. So yeah, creativity is key, isn't it, with these kind of things? Because you've got to know what the tropes are. You've got to be able to hit those points. You've got to have an ensemble that isn't the most hateful group of assholes you've ever seen in your life. Because where do you go from that?
I don't know. The other thing is that, and just to wind up our discussion, is that like I don't. This isn't a good movie, and it's even if it was, even if it's a sort of a good bad movie, like I happen to think it is, or even if it was a terrible movie, part of me wants to tell everyone out there to watch this movie anyway, because ultimately I want Netflix to make more horror stuff. And the way they're going to do that is if we all watch their horror stuff and the algorithm goes, oh, people are watching the horror stuff. You should make more of that. So even if it's not your thing, maybe just put it on the background while you're cleaning your house or something and let the algorithm know you want more horror stuff from Netflix. That's my hot take for the day. It's,
More horror is always a good thing. Absolutely.
yeah, because we can't rely on Shutter because they don't have the budget. I love Shutter, but their productions have a noticeably different budget
Um,
scale than Netflix.
yeah, I've actually stopped watching Shudder. It's really interesting you mentioned Shudder because I haven't watched anything on Shudder in about 6 or 7 months, and I used to
Hmm.
watch it a lot on there. But I watched a lot of their own content. I love Revenge. I don't know if you ever saw Revenge. I actually really really like Revenge. I don't know if that was a Shudder production or if they just picked up the licensing
I
for it, the
think they
streaming for
bought
it.
the rights. I think.
But their own made stuff, you're right, isn't fantastic, and sometimes that's okay. But um, Shudder tends to focus on the kind of horror that I don't really enjoy, like demonic possession. You know, I can't do that, and very graphic kind of body horror, which I can't do. There's some other good stuff on there, but I'm not sure if there's enough for me to warrant another subscription. And I've noticed as well my taste in horror as I get older, maybe having kids is doing it as well. I'm becoming a lot more sensitive to horror. So if it's not creatively done, I'm starting to find it a bit of a turn off.
Interesting.
Did your wife? Sorry, go ahead.
I will say the one thing I do actually love about Shudder is that when you load up their app, at least on Apple TV, the first thing it goes to is just they have like a running live stream and
Mm-hmm.
of like there's like three different channels and you can switch between them and it just drops you
Mm-hmm.
into whatever movie happens to be playing
Yeah.
and this is going to date me, I know, but like my favorite way, like I have so many memories of staying up past my parents being in bed and stumbling on to some ridiculous thing in the middle of the night, a third of the way in, and going, "What is this?" and finding something new and interesting. And sometimes it was schlock, and sometimes it was great, but I miss that way of discovering things.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we've lost that. We lost that
Mm-hmm.
basically when streaming became the thing. And I know that makes me an old man, and I'm fine with that.
I couldn't agree more. I absolutely couldn't agree more. One of my favorite things, I've got a Roku TV, and Roku has the Samuel Goldwyn channel,
Hmm.
which is a free streaming channel, and it's not on demand. So you can put that on, and you'll randomly have something like Guys and Dolls, or there was a fantastic movie, a Robert Altman movie that I talked about with you a couple of weeks ago. And just random stuff. And you're totally right. When my parents went to bed, I would put on like BBC Two or Channel 4 and watch black and white B movies and horrors and early Dracula and sci-fi that I was not seeing, because I watched a lot of fantasy sci-fi. I don't know if I've ever mentioned Star Wars before, but I watched a lot of
No,
that
never,
out of
never said.
choice. So it was kind of a wake up moment to see things like 2001 and to see things that weren't like fantasy sci fi. And that was all turning the TV on randomly and having it on TV. So
Yeah,
I totally get what you mean.
yeah. Well, out of five, what are you going to give Texas Chainsaw?
Can I give 0 from what I saw? Is that
This
possible?
this the scale I made only goes from 1 to 5, so 1.
Okay. For the
Or actually, no. There is one of a shrugging emoji technically.
no, I'm going to give 1 star for the chainsaw bottle opener at the very, very beginning.
Fair enough. And
What do you
I
give it
will
for?
give it. I can't, what did I give it on? I think I gave it a. Hang on.
Is this a 3 star
Uh,
movie for you, really?
I think I gave it a 3 because I think it's fine. Like I know I'm in very much in the minority, but it was also like I had a really good time watching it. So
I mean,
what do
your wife's the horror
you?
aficionado. Did she watch it?
Yeah, we watched it together.
What did she think?
She had effectively the same reaction that I did,
Okay.
which was that like it's not scary, it's really dumb. It's pretty fun though. Pretty fun though. We're basically had the like the Larry David reaction. You're like pretty good,
Pretty
pretty
good.
good, pretty good. So yeah,
I do
yeah.
value, I no offense, but I value your wife's opinions on horror more than any other person, writer, or anything that I know, because her tastes are very similar to mine when it comes to like schlocky horror.
Well, and as you well know, because you've known me longer than I've known my wife, that I never used to be a big horror
Yeah.
person, and in being in a relationship with my wife has meant that I have had actual exposure to a lot of horror, and now I think it's one of the most important and creative genres going in film today. So,
Oh,
you know,
nice work. She's
yeah,
turned you.
yeah, she has. So
Okay.
speaking of creativity and horror, that's an excellent segue that I'm going to bring back to go on to our next film,
Yes.
which is the period set werewolf horror picture The Curse, which
Yes.
I quite liked, and Simon, I believe you love. So I will let
Oh,
you
yeah, love
deal
this one.
out the synopsis on this one. Give us the Cole's notes on The Cursed.
It's werewolf gothic horror, and that as a pitch note is all you need really as well. It's although no one ever says werewolves, but you start in the Battle of the Somme in 19
If,
19
if, 19
and a British soldier gets horribly wounded whilst charging from the trenches in the Battle of the Somme, and he gets brought into this tent where the medics are furiously trying to save the other Brit soldiers by hacking off hacking off ankles and hands. And honestly, I went straight to this after turning off Texas Chainsaw Massacre because it was too graphic, and they're hacking off like feet into buckets. I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake, no! But luckily,
There's
it
a
doesn't
lot.
stay that way.
There's a lot of in the first bit of this movie. There's a lot of limb removal.
Yes, there is, and not
Yeah.
all of it up to code. And so you've got a guy, and he's brought in, and he's muttering something, and the doctor says, what's he saying? And the nurse says, sounds like a nursery rhyme. And here's your first clue: if someone mortally wounded comes into your makeshift war operation room, muttering a nursery rhyme, probably don't try and save him. Probably not a good idea. So he's got 3 shots to the abdomen. And the doctor pulls out 1 and pulls out 2, and he's like, oh, the third one. And he's this brilliant, like, stoic British, oh yes, he's pouring blood, it'll be fine, we'll just patch him up with a nice cup of tea. So the third one, he's like, oh, there's more shrapnel in there, I'll have to pull it out. And all the while the guy's talking. And as he pulls out the last thing, it's this almost V-shaped silver bullet. And he says,
it's a huge effing bullet,
this isn't a German bullet. And then we go flashback, and intercut with the Somme stuff is a woman going to a house asking to see someone who is not doing very well. And then we see from the flashback that we go back to this woman when she was very, very young, living in this house. And so the story is it's a completely fictionalized story of English people taking land from people that had it before them, and doing it entirely brutally. I don't know. Some people's minds are so creative to think of such fictional things as this.
Indeed.
And in this case, it's an English field that a group of wandering gypsies, like Romanians, have
Romani peoples.
Romani people have land claim to, and the owner of the estate very carefully considers their claim, and then decides that with his local people in the encampment, that it's probably best they just kill them all, because that's probably the best way.
It's actually one of my favorite. Well, not favorite. I think one of the most interesting parts of the film is that he's like, we shall go and we shall talk. We shall bring all our guns, but we shan't use them unless we absolutely, as a last resort, need to. And so they surround this Romani village with a bunch of people, all with guns. And one of them comes out and is in Romania is like, hey, what are you all doing out here? And then they just start killing everyone. And someone's like, I think at one point someone's like, he resisted. That one, right? He's the one. He resisted, so we had to kill him all.
How about being oppressed on my field, which is their field?
Yeah. And to be fair, that sequence is
oh my god,
really, really compelling.
Okay.
It's a single long take of this massacre, and it's super upsetting and super compelling and brilliantly made.
Yeah. If you've ever been involved in filmmaking on any level, or even if you haven't, you can imagine that the time it takes to set up any kind of shot and any kind of group activity is like the hours you just can't believe. So to watch this single shot of the bunch of the horses arrive at this tent, and you don't hear what people are saying, but you can tell what, like, with the body language, the anger that comes out. And they proceed to shoot at these people. They're riding around on horses. They burn all the tents. I would be really curious if any of that was CG, because it looked completely like a single shot of people burning stuff. And the safety and the choreography of all these people running around and horses running around, like, to get that right that way was mind-blowing. And really, it does set the tone nicely for how well this film's directed. There's one key point here that before this happens, we see a couple of the people in the gypsy camp get a bag of silver, and it gets melted into a mold of some wolf-like teeth, like a pair of dentures for a really old wolf. And
it's like an old jawbone of a person, basically.
Right. And then this old lady puts them, and interestingly, on our screener, we didn't get subtitles. But you can pretty much work out, she puts them in the middle of these candles and then mutters this incantation over them. So these teeth are the root of the curse of the movie. And without ruining too much of this film, during the brutalized, the brutal way these people are killed, one person is made an example of in a very horrific way. And the woman, who's like the witchy type, is buried alive with clutching onto these teeth. And
Mm-hmm.
this forms the root of the curse of the land. And then um, through a set of circumstances of dreams, and a bunch of kids come and basically get involved, and the curse starts to spread, and the curse spreads in the form of people transferring this like werewolf disease to each other, and
Yeah.
then hunting the rest of the people. It's
Yeah.
fantastic.
And it's never explicitly said that they're werewolves, but they're werewolves.
No,
They're basically werewolves.
well, the guy who turns up, Boyd Holbrook, with the all of the English accents. To be fair, um,
Yeah.
he calls them wolves, but when you see them, the creature design isn't a classic. It's not like American Werewolf in London. They're not recognizably wolves.
Yeah.
They're more like, if you've ever seen Neil Marshall's The Descent, it actually reminded me of that a bit more. But good creature
Yeah.
design.
A little
I really
bit.
liked it. Yeah.
Yeah. Super interesting creature design. It's got a really dark and like misty, foreboding atmosphere. I wouldn't say that it was at any point terribly scary, but it is foreboding throughout.
Mm-hmm.
It's what you would call atmospheric horror.
Mm-hmm.
Boyd Holbrook, despite his accent, is pretty compelling. I thought,
Yeah,
except for
he
like,
is. Yeah.
it's interesting because like, um, I can hear just enough to be like, that's not the same accent he was using in the last scene. um, but the only one that actually ever kicked me out is there is a moment where something happens and he yells no, and he's like, in that moment he's fully American again.
Yeah, yeah,
And there's one moment where he's fully American. You're like, wait a minute, like, you
absolutely.
know,
And it's
he just
my
took a trip from Cornwall to Wales
oh
to
god,
Manchester to London to
all
America, and
over.
America's the one that kicked me out of it. I don't
And my dumbass over here, I'm like, one of the main themes of this is the classist upper classes wiping out the lower classes. It's not just the Romanis; it's the serving staff in the house are treated a very particular way. Even the man and his wife, it's established very early on that their marriage is not a passionate one. He's very like stoic and withheld with his emotions. So it's my dumbass going, oh yeah, this character, maybe he's got like this classist past. He's putting on this accent to try and fit
Nope.
in. No, just a really
Just
bad accent.
no, just British. He's just British. That's fine.
Oh well,
Um,
it's
I also really enjoyed. So Kelly Riley is the main woman in this. She plays the wife of the manor owner.
mm-hmm,
Kelly Riley, who you would recognize from the Sherlock Holmes movies with Robert Downey. She was in the second season of True Detective. She's currently starring still on Yellowstone, I believe, on Paramount Network, and she is
mm-hmm.
pretty fantastic, I thought. And the name of the dude, the manor owner, is actually a pretty well respected British character actor whose name I'm going to remember as soon as I stop trying to think of it.
Oh no.
Um,
The guy from Rogue One.
yeah, he's in
That's what
Rogue
you
One.
mean.
That's what you need to know. Yeah, and he's quite good too, as like the upper
Alistair
class stoic,
Alistair
like,
Petrie.
yeah, he very good as the sort of upper class British, like, well, they were on my land, and it may have
Yes.
been their land before, but now it's mine.
Yes.
So wonderful! I've murdered them all.
Yes, though they have a claim to the land. We should probably kill them.
Yeah, spot of
Okay.
tea, darling.
Yeah.
It's-
Some very interesting choices in this film that aren't necessarily um, vital or even important to anything that happens in later on in the movie. I I wonder if it's a bit of a spoiler. It's not really a spoiler because nothing is ever made of it. It's just a really good example of a creative director just giving us something to add to the world, like to add to the world
Mhm.
building. And it's when, right at the beginning of the flashback to 35 years, the Alistair Petrie is out hunting, and the woman of the house, sorry, the actress Kelly Riley
Hmm.
asks very nicely the maid, because she's very nice to the maids. Please draw me a bath. I'd like to have someone to draw me a bath. That sounds good.
Mm.
And he comes back from hunting and bursts into the bathroom, and she's there topless, but her back is to camera. But you can see like it's a very intimate shot because it's not really hidden. You can see everything,
Yeah, I mean, she's
and you have
bathing. She's,
she's bathing, she's washing, and she's kind of on her knees away from the door. And the husband walks in, and it's really there's nothing spoken. They just stare at each other, and he just turns and closes the door
yeah.
and walks out, and she almost covers herself up in shame. And it's one of those really interesting moments where nothing is said, but it gives us this really important insight into their marriage not being physical, or the kind of person he is. And this isn't important to the rest of the movie at all, but
Well,
it gives us a bit
it's
more world building.
it's sort of
It's more about
important.
him.
Yeah, there's more about him. Like it immediately makes clear that their marriage is one where he's like, well, I'm a lord, and I need at least two heirs, and I have married a fine woman to give them to me. We've
Mhm.
had sex 2 times. We've had 2 children, and I'm done.
Yes, yes.
Um, but it also, and nothing ever comes of um, never comes of it. But there's definitely a connection between her character and Boyd Holbrook's character. It's never
Yeah.
acted on, but
No.
it makes that connection make so much more sense.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
like because he actually hears and sees her in a way that her husband doesn't, as
Mm-hmm.
even just as a person.
Mm-hmm.
When she says something, he's like, "Oh yes, good, good. I heard you, and that was a good suggestion."
Yes.
Like whereas her husband is always, she's like, "I think this," and she's like, "Shut up, darling." Like,
I won't hear of it
there's
at the
never,
table.
yeah. So there's there, yeah. It's
But we could have got what I'm saying. Like we could have got all of that from the rest of the movie. That without that scene, we could have got the same thing. But it was just a really nice moment that gave us some more character building, world building. And
yeah.
honestly, I don't know who the director of this thing is. You said it's a first time director, did you?
Uh,
Um,
he is. I don't know if he's time, but he's
but
newish, I believe.
I
Sean
thought he,
Sean Ellis.
I thought
He's directed a
brilliant,
couple things.
brilliantly directed. I thought like really got that idea of gothic horror, that big wide fog lit hills, like very very English. Where's he from? Oh, he's from Brighton. Okay, all right. So that's why it feels like it captures that kind of gothic English field, which has a very particular look and
Hmm.
smell. That if you're an American director, sometimes you miss that. You light it too much, or like that. We get a lot of like mystical fog on our hills, but not too many werewolves. But no, I thought it was great, really well directed, and I really liked actually the younger version of the sister played by an actress called Oini Rose Daly, who I thought was really good, really really focused and really compelling.
Hmm.
And uh,
No, wait, isn't she's the friend? That's the friend, I think.
oh, is it? Who's the daughter then?
Uh,
Amelia Crouch? No, yes,
I'm looking at
Amelia
the wrong.
Crouch. Then.
Yeah, Amelia Crouch is the daughter, I think.
Sorry, yeah, I got the wrong actress, but I mean the they're all pretty good. But the focus she had was great, and I really like how there's a few times in this movie I was like, well, I'm not quite sure what's going on. I'm not sure if I've missed something, and the movie's really good in the like giving you the threads. It gives you a bit of action, and then it gives you a bit of context to tie it together. It's one of those kind of satisfying payoffs, and
Yeah, I didn't like this movie as much as you did, but I did like it.
what
I
didn't
felt that
work
it
for you?
was. So something. This is the thing. Nothing really didn't work for me. I felt that the pace was probably the pace was a little bit too languid for me, and the I thought the creature design was excellent, but we didn't really get enough of the creature stuff exactly. Um, and ultimately the thing that won me over is that it's just a beautifully shot movie.
Yeah.
In particular, toward the end, there's some big, sweeping, long shots of some fires in buildings, and it's just gorgeous the whole time. Like
Yeah.
the Mr. Ellis and his cinematographer know how to point a camera at things and capture them well.
Yeah.
It's very beautiful, and he, like you say, that sort of like feeling and, for lack of a better word, yeah, like smell of that sort of uh,
Mm.
English Gothic, misty, sort of moldy
Yeah.
feel. Um,
Yeah. It's
sort of
really
rusty,
apparent, isn't
moldy.
it?
Like it's the type of feeling where like um, the manor house looks good, but you wouldn't be surprised to find like that the wood is rotting away under the paint. Like that's the
Yeah.
kind of feel that the whole thing has,
Very
and
metaphorical.
it's real good. It's real pretty. Um,
Is this in cinemas?
I It's in cinemas. Yes, I believe it's on demand as well, but it's in cinemas.
Right.
I can't remember who's releasing it in America, but it is released by Elevation Pictures in Canada,
So
and they generally have pretty good taste.
yeah, I would say if you can, if what we're saying interests you and you can find it in a giant dark room, I think this will enhance your enjoyment because I watched it on a laptop screen with my name emblazoned in the middle. Thanks for that, Elevation. Like my gothic horror had my name in giant white letters in the middle of this movie. And I think this is definitely a movie that would benefit from a big dark like focus room because it is quite a lot of the movie is obviously gothic and dark.
It is quite dark, and unless you have a proper room for it, it's not really going to work. It's only in theaters, actually. It's not on demand yet.
Okay.
Uh, Let me just see if I can find some information. Yeah, I don't see any information about a home release just yet, but it's in theaters. It's actually in theaters as of well, where this episode will be out on Sunday, so as of this past Friday, it's
Right.
in theaters in select cities in Canada, and I think it's totally, again, it's interesting because the two movies we've covered in this episode of the podcast, I'm giving two 3-star reviews, and you're giving a one and a
Four.
four or five.
Yeah. Four.
So I thought they were both fine, and you loved one and hated the other. So it's
It's almost like
interesting.
art is subjective.
I know,
The
right? Who would have thought that?
I mean, it's definitely for the reasons why I disliked Texas Chainsaw Massacre and you did are the same reasons why I loved The Curse and you just thought it was good. Like
Yeah,
that that it is pretty graphic in some places, but it's all like creepy and it's all um, stylized monster movie. It's just completely my wheelhouse with lots of English stoic classist stuff going
yeah.
on. Like uh,
I
I
did
do
find
love
it.
that kind of thing.
I did find it interesting, and I would love to speak with Sean Ellis about this if we ever got the opportunity. But I did find it interesting. The movie actually sets up one monster and then goes with another at one point too, and I found that really interesting. And I'm not sure if it's a deliberate subversion or if they were going for one thing and changed their mind, or
Do
I
you
don't know.
mean the second person who gets bitten?
No, so in the beginning of the film, when the Romani people are all massacred, the woman's buried alive, and her husband is dismembered and hung up like a scarecrow.
Huh. Yeah.
And then the whole town starts having the same dream, which, if everyone's having the same dream, pro tip, you should probably leave. But of course they don't. And everyone's dreaming about the scarecrow, and every dream has the scarecrow like come to life and interacting with people in various ways and turning its head creepily. And then it turns out that the monster is werewolves from the teeth. And
Hmm.
scarecrow is at a certain point, you just never see the scarecrow again.
That's a
And
good point. Yeah.
I kind of wondered now in the moment and now, like, was that a choice, or was it like a deliberate subversion or misdirection, or what? But because the
Mm.
scarecrow was very creepy as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
and maybe even, I would argue, a little bit creepier than the werewolves themselves.
So I had a very young experience with American Werewolf in London, and it made me terrified of werewolves,
Hmm.
probably up until like including today. And I did not find these monsters remotely creepy at all, and that's fine by me because I I'll watch werewolf movies now, but it is a little bit white knuckle because they didn't really look like wolves at all. They look like if you've seen Come to Daddy, the Aphex Twin video with the white, the
Yeah,
pale humanoid teeth biting the grandma, but muscular and hunched over and quadrupedal versions of that. It
yeah,
was
yeah.
I wouldn't have looked at those monsters and said that's a wolf. Like they're not your classic werewolf wolves, which honestly is better for me that way. But I did really enjoy how infected people go from human to wolf. Like it's not a standard transformation. There's like a midway point that's a bit more tentacly, which I really like.
Yeah, yeah. The creature design and the transformation design is really really good and really interesting
Yeah, yeah,
and upsetting, a little bit upsetting,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but in a good way. You know, it's
There is one moment in this film that bothered me. It's a slight spoiler, but someone gets attacked and Boyd Holbrook, in one of his accents, works it out. And he walks in and demands, "Where is she?" And because the thing is, like, she's in the house. Where is she? Where's the insert person's name here? And the father's like, "Oh, I don't know, but now we're going to have an argument. I want you to leave." And they have this argument, and then he goes to bed. It's
hmm.
like, oh, what about the really dangerous idea that one person might be infected in the house we've just boarded up? Is that an issue? So that bothered me, but honestly, that would be maybe why it's 4 instead of 5. But I really love this film. I thought it was
Yeah.
great.
Well, good. So yeah, there you have it, folks. Two films, divisive opinions, but you should definitely see The Cursed because we both liked it. Yeah.
You should watch both of
Uh,
them and see
I
who
mean, you
you
should
agree
again.
with.
I
One
mean,
of
you
us
should
is right.
watch. You should watch both of them because again, we definitely want Netflix to make more horror stuff, and they're not
Yeah.
going to do that if we don't watch their horror stuff. So for 84 minutes, do the dishes, mop your floor, and just leave it on in the background. Because if you watch
It's
at
not
least
really.
20 minutes of it, they're not going to know the difference. So
That's a good point. Play the
yeah,
game.
yeah, good.
I've noticed today is the anniversary of Army of Darkness. So 29th,
Is it?
today's the 29th anniversary of Ash versus the Evil Dead, otherwise known as Evil Dead 3, otherwise known as Army of Darkness. I just want to show Matt here, if I lean over to my DVD collection, I have the official bootleg version introduced by Bruce Campbell, which adds 15 extra minutes. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. So maybe as we wind down this episode and talk about future episodes, maybe to commemorate this wonderful moment, we should do an Evil Dead rewatch of the classics and talk about those at some point. How do you feel
We
about Evil
should.
Dead?
I feel pretty good about that. The other interesting thing about that is that you could very easily do. We could do like a make remake episode too, because Evil Dead 2 is just Evil Dead 1 over again, but
It
with
really
money.
is. Yeah.
Like no, like actively. Like if you, I've seen interviews where Sam Raimi's like, yeah, they gave us a budget, so we did it again. And Sam Raimi is no joke. I think actually my favorite director. So I'm down to
Oh,
watch whatever you got. So
wait. Sam Raimi is your favorite director, and
yeah,
he's about to do an MCU movie.
yep,
That's going to work out pretty well for you.
it is. It is. The trailer for that movie, which is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, looks
Mm.
quite compelling.
It does
Um,
because as you know, I don't like the character of Doctor Strange. It does nothing for me. I'm not a big fan of Cumberbatch anymore. And watching that trailer has made me want to go and see that movie like immediately because
yeah,
Sam. We could do a whole episode on Sam Raimi and his framing and his editing and his shots. There's something very distinct about his filming that I can't quite put my finger on, but I'm sure you could. But that's for
it's
another
interesting because
time, I'm sure.
again, just to bring it back to the beginning of the show. So I watched all three Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies this week, and I love that if you watch his films from the lowest of the low budget, like Evil Dead, all the way through the biggest of the big budget, like Spider-Man's 2 and 3, his style of shooting never changes.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a couple of tricks that seem really dumb and seem really obvious, but when you put them in context for something like Army of Darkness or like Spider-Man, they work so well. And one of them is, and there's a scene in Spider-Man 2 where Peter is trying to like reconcile with Mary Jane, and it's a pretty famous scene because it's the one where they're sitting in a cafe and then Doc Ock throws a car through the window and they
Mm-hmm.
jump out of the way. But after the car is thrown through the window, they both stand up, and you can hear this like thump, thump, thump as Doc Ock is like coming towards them. And every time you hear a crash from one of his tentacles, like hitting the ground or clinging to a wall or whatever's happening, the camera zooms in like just a little bit, and
Yeah.
it's constantly zooming in on their faces. And that effect is so. It seems like it'd be so dumb, but it's so good at just heightening the tension just a little bit. And it
Mm-hmm.
also, in the case of a movie like a Spider-Man movie, it works so well because it's a comic book, and that kind of thing needs to
Yeah.
be a little bit heightened. And I still think that Sam Raimi managed to capture a comic book world in a way that basically no other film has done before or since.
Do you know
And
one
so
of the first?
I'm very excited to see what he does with the Marvel picture, because I kind of hope he's able to capture that again.
Yeah, one of the first comic book movies that really made me aware that you could do more mature stories was Darkman with Liam Neeson, which
Yep,
is another one of his.
yep.
And that was a real 1990s Darkman. So I must have watched that on TV in 91 or 92. And that was a real wake up moment for what you could do with a darker kind of approach to a superhero. And it's got his characteristic stuff again. Um,
And
and I wonder,
also, I'm pretty
yeah, go
sure
ahead.
that Darkman is the one that he did because he couldn't get the rights to the Shadow. I think that's the
Oh,
story.
really? Oh, that's interesting. Huh.
Like there, maybe it's not the Shadow. It's definitely one of them where he wanted to do one thing and he couldn't get the rights to do it, so he made Darkman. Yeah, unable to secure the rights to either the Shadow or Batman, Raimi decided to create his own superhero and struck a deal with Universal Studios to make his first Hollywood-produced film, Darkman.
Yeah, it's
So,
awesome.
which is it's awesome to me because it's the same way that we got Indiana Jones. Lucas and
Yes,
Spielberg
yeah.
couldn't get the rights to Tintin, so they just made up Indiana Jones.
Let's do a Raimi special because then I could rewatch Drag Me to Hell, which is legitimately one of my favorite horror movies.
And again, a lot of his same like visual hallmarks are there. The sweeping
Yeah,
camera, the quick
the humor.
zooms, all of that stuff.
Yeah,
The humor, the like upsetting
the
vaudeville
goat.
humor, the dancing demon and the goat that calls her a bitch. It's all there.
Yeah,
Um,
uh,
so
cool.
anyway,
So
that's
we'll
very
do
much like The Cursed, and
it. So yes, please watch both of these movies. Try and go and watch The Curse on the theatre if you're really into how we've described it, because I think it will enhance it for you.
I agree. And it's only in theaters, so if you're safe doing so, then do so. Get a vaccination,
Yes.
or
Oh
two, or
God.
thrip,
Oh God. Yes.
and go watch the movie.
Good. And
Good.
you can support us in the following ways.
Yes, thank you for listening. It is our favorite way that you support us. We also have a Patreon and a Ko-fi and a PayPal. You can find all of these at awesomefriday.ca. We
Wow,
broadcast to you pre-recorded from the unceded lands of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations, and we're very happy to have been listened to by you. Also, Patreon. Seriously, Patreon would be lovely. You could also just go to the site and click on an ad. We have ads. If you turn off your ad blocker, you'll see them, and if you click on them, it'll give me like $1. So you should do that.
yeah.
I mean, that's not exactly accurate. It'll give me it'll put somewhere between 7 cents and $3, usually closer to 7 cents into the kitty. But that's
It all
how ads
helps.
work on the internet. It all helps because
But we
we're
thank you
we're
for
gonna
listening.
we are gonna need to upgrade our podcasting host at some point soon. So any little bit will help.
Oh, thank you so much. But even just a review would be very nice.
Yeah, even just a 5-star review on your favorite podcasting platform would be super useful. All of that helps get our show in front of the eyeballs of other potential listeners.
Which is
Yeah,
always good. Oh,
always good.
eyeballs and earballs, both very
Yes,
important.
very important.
Well, thank you very
Good.
much. Please go watch these movies and listen to Boyd Holbrook's rotating British accent.
Yep, and we will be back in a week's time, and I don't 100% know what we'll be watching, but there's a new Disney Plus
That's on the
series, and
list.
there's a Canadian drama that just came out that we will hopefully be talking about. So,
oh, right. I'm looking forward to the show notes. I don't know this show, whatever Simon wants because of his birthday. So
yeah, if you wanted
next
to
week,
pick something,
yes, we're only going to talk about the after party episode 3, and I will be singing. So
I mean, we could
that's
talk
next
about the
week.
after party. So it's up there for you to choose something.
Okay, I'll think about it.
Good.
All right, guys. Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thank you. Have a good night. Have a good day. Have a good whatever time of day you're listening. Have a good one.
Adios.
Okay.